Hello and hi dear friends, it's Bernd here. In this video, I'll explain everything about the orchid substrate Colomi and why you and your orchids will love it. I'll explain it to you after the intro. What requirements do orchids or you as users have for a good orchid substrate? On one hand, it must be user-friendly. That means when I plant or repot such a plant, it has to be quick, easy, and clean. At the same time, your plant has its demands. I want a structurally stable substrate that remains structurally stable over several months and years and has water retention capacity. The nutrient supply is also ensured in the same way. And it ensures that the substrate doesn't become too salty too quickly, because salinization in the substrate causes the roots to get damaged and eventually die. You can recognize a brown and black spot on the roots. A very important highlight: with the discount code Gartenschlau, you can shop at Colomi. Save a whole 10% on your next purchase. That means add products to your cart, enter Gartenschlau as the promo code, and save 10%. So what exactly is Colomi? Colomi is a zeolite. A zeolite is an aluminum silicate that occurs in nature in 60 different modifications. It can also be produced synthetically, and there are over 380 zeolite groups are known. A zeolite, so this aluminum silicate, forms microporous framework structures. These are octawheels, that is equilateral triangles, arranged like this, and they form a framework structure. And this structure can absorb substances, and that ensures that there is a high ion exchange capacity. Where else are zeolites used? Have you ever been confronted with that directly? In most cases, probably yes, because zeolites are used as ion exchangers. For example, for water softening, where hard water contains lime. So calcium and magnesium. Magnesium is softened, and that is used in laundry detergents so that the laundry can be washed more easily and better. Very important, subscribe to the channel, give a thumbs up and another thumbs up. The more thumbs up, the better. And of course, subscribe to the channel. Why is the zeolite treated now? Untreated, zeolite loses its ion exchange capacity in no time due to natural processes, because the channels and pores get clogged. These pores and channels are also referred to as capillaries. You also know capillaries from plants because the capillaries ensure that the capillary action in the plant helps to transport water from deep in the ground through the roots all the way up to the tips of the shoots. And this process is super important. And it also ensures that zeolite functions as an ion exchanger and can store water. Without this ion exchange capacity, zeolite wouldn't be suitable for orchids or plants in general. And that's why Colomi came up with the idea that we need to coat the zeolite. This coating preserves the ion exchange property for years. This coating consists of polyols. That's a polyol, which can be colored with pigments, just like we have with interior wall paint. It can be colored. That means we can color Colomi in green. Then we can put the plant here on the wall and we won't see the plant anymore. That's a little tip for everyone who already has too many plants, but still want to hide their plants. How many colors are there at Colomi? We have over 15 different colors. There are all sorts of colors: yellow, pink, purple, black, brown, gold, and silver, for example. And there are even more colors: light blue, white, and so on. Colomi retains up to 30% of its own volume in water. This means that this water is also available for the plant even when it looks dry in the pot. Available for the plant for a few days, up to 4 days. That means you have to water it first, but with a delay. But I'll get to that later, because that's an important point when working with Colomi, that it actually works. Colomi releases water slowly, and that's those 4 days on the surface. Even though the Colomi is wet, it feels dry because of this coating. Uncoated. Zeolite, the surface is wet. That would be bad for the plant because then the root would practically be sitting in water and it would get damaged. And that's exactly what you want to avoid. Let's get to an important question. And when a plant is in Colomi, you need to fertilize it additionally. Many people always think of fertilizing NPK fertilizer, which is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Do you have to do that with Colomi? No, you don't have to. Nitrate are, for example, introduced through drinking water, tap water, and rainwater. Supplied. This happens because the farmer fertilizes his field and the nitrates are washed into the groundwater. Through the groundwater, it goes into the drinking water and then practically reaches your plant in Colomi. Alternative: plant parts, flower pollen, leaves that accumulate on the roof. It's raining, it washes everything down into the rain barrel. This is how nitrates are washed into the rain barrel and thus practically introduced into the Colomi system through the rainwater. With phosphorus, it's like this. Phosphorus serves as a corrosion protection for the water pipes so that they don't corrode. At the same time, there is also phosphorus in natural waters, which then rises as particles, as steam, and then as rain. It either goes back into the groundwater or into the rain barrel. With you, it works. And that's how you have it, available as fertilizer. The other substances, NP, potassium, K potassium, are already contained in Colomi. In zeolite, that means we have everything in here. Calcium, magnesium, copper, manganese, boron, molybdenum. Basically everything is in there. Your plant is also fully supplied with iron. You don't have to worry about that. And this property remains intact for more than 8 years. At the same time, since Colomi acts as an ion exchanger and softens hard water, does it ensure that the substrate can't become salty? And that's a super important point for your orchids, why they feel really comfortable in this substrate. Does it have to be colorful? No, it doesn't have to be colorful, but the decorative effect of this plant, when it's just standing there like this. Without flowers, that's usually the point with orchids that many say, without flowers, it's boring. I throw them away, I buy a new one with flowers, then it's nice again. I'm sure that in this way, you can integrate the plant decoratively into the room, and it will be thrown away less often. Because even without flowers, brings a certain decorative effect with it and then is taken care of for so long until it blooms again. That means Colomi ensures that probably, I suspect, fewer plants will be thrown away. Which orchids is Colomi suitable for? You see, I have a lot of plants. The majority of my plants are epiphytic orchids, meaning they are sitting orchids that grow either on a branch, growing on a branch fork, growing directly on the trunk, or hanging somewhere on the plant. No problem at all with Colomi. Then there are orchids like lady's slipper orchids, which grow more terrestrially. Not a problem at all. You could even buy a garden hose there at a nursery that specializes in native orchids, Cypripedium, or also known as a lady's slipper, a peony or whatever else is available there, and plant it in Colomi. That's not a problem at all. You could also consider lithophytic orchids. So plants, orchids that grow on rocks, on stones, can also be planted in Colomi without any problems. What types of plant containers are there? You see, I have many plants in glass here. Actually quite attractive. Looks decorative, you can do that. I'll get closer to that in a moment. When it comes to planting, then there's the so-called orchid top. Here is a Phalaenopsis, japonica in it, formerly known as Sederia japonica. And of course you can use regular orchid pots. You see here in the front I have my Phalaenopsis seedlings. They have developed beautiful new leaves. They are in regular orchid pots. I just put the fine substrate in there. How do I plant plants? With Colomi, in what container and how, and what should I pay attention to? Just a moment. As I said, you can practically use any container. I would use containers where you can take a look inside, because it's definitely easier when it comes to watering. With a glass vase, you can easily look inside. With an orchid, when you lift it up, it can of course spill out from the bottom. With orchids, you can see in the pot whether there's still water in it. Basically, planting is super easy, and it's really important to pay attention to where you plant it. I could also plant it here in the regular orchids. Then the Colomi can spill out from the bottom and possibly fall out. And that doesn't have to be the case. That's why I'm using these glass vases here. It's very important that the roots are right at the bottom, at least part of the roots, so that this small water reservoir I create is at the bottom. A small film of water can of course be reached through the roots Then it's crucial with the orchids. You see, here is a cymbidium, then Cattleya wanda, dendrobium, all sorts of things. You need to pay attention. How thick is the root of the orchids? Very delicate orchids prefer a finer substrate. Coarse roots generally want more air. To have the roots, this applies to all orchids. That means you take the coarse substrate, just like this one here with this Phalaenopsis pulcherrima. The case is, with this dendrobium, it has fine roots, but it's in a glass container. If you're planting an orchid in a glass container, I would generally recommend that you take the coarse substrate, because then the air circulation in the substrate is significantly better. As with the fine substrate, it would also work with the fine substrate. I have the cymbidium in fine substrate. However, this is a wide bowl and that ensures better air circulation. In a normal orchid pot, where there are holes at the bottom, or the orchid top, which is practically completely open. You can also, with orchids, with thick roots, use the fine substrate. That works too. I have a wanderer here in an orchid top. It's in fine substrate and that works great. But I'll get into the plants in a more in-depth video where I address the individual topics. To specifically talk about orchid pots and glass containers that would go beyond the scope here. You take the glass container or the planting pot. Make sure that the root or a few roots are right at the bottom. Touch the bottom. If necessary, weave the roots at the bottom of the other pots. Then you just let it fall in. Sprinkle. Make sure that all the gaps here are filled. And that's it. And now we come to a point where you just let it sprinkle in. The substrate stays permanently loose. That means if you ever want to repot the plant, you can just pull it out. Right now there's no plant in there. That's why I'm using this pot. When you want to water the plant, you can only do that 24 hours later. When you've just planted it, then it's best to take a spray bottle and just spray the surface like this. It's recommended that you do this with a spray bottle, because when you water with a watering can, too much water just comes in, and then there's water at the bottom, and then the roots get damaged, and that's not good. The less water, the better. The substrate also retains water. And you can see how quickly the column has absorbed the water, and now comes an important point. Especially with glass containers, I would work with a spray bottle. If you use a regular orchid pot or the orchid top, it's recommended to water it thoroughly the next day after planting. So, 24 hours later you can water the substrate thoroughly. Either really water it well with a watering can, or give it a good rinse under the shower or at the sink. And then you can let the plant sit. Let it sit for a week, even if below, then this water film is absorbed. Once it's gone, you still have 4 days until you need to water. So, 4 days doesn't have to be the case. That also depends on the season or where the plant is placed. It can also dry out faster. You need to develop a sense for that. Let's move on to the last and important point. Pests. Pests. You always end up getting them. You can get them from anywhere. They're everywhere. You buy a plant because it has such a beautiful bloom, and you don't pay attention to whether there are any pests in there on it. Most of the time it's mealybugs, and then you take the plant home. And then the drama unfolds. You have mealybugs. Pests love organic material. Colomi is mineral. That means that just can't work at all. They don't find that at all great, because the only organic material is basically the plant, and as long as there are no dead roots, that's not an issue. I've already shown you, you can just pull the plant out. Then you remove the dead root and put it back into the same Colomi. That's actually the next huge advantage of Colomi. And pests love it when substrates are superficially moist. And that's not the case with Colomi either, because the coating keeps the water in, and there is basically a barrier created by the coating, and the water can't escape. That means, with pests, if the plant is infested, only the plant is affected. The substrate doesn't need to be treated. You basically only need to treat the plant. First, apply the insecticide or plant protection product that you have, and then basically repeat it after 2 weeks. Works super easy. Have I already tested it successfully? Anyone who follows the channel knows that I had one or another plant. I had a problem with mealybugs. Among others, the Dendrobium beryoda. I've treated it twice now. It practically has no pests anymore and is blooming beautifully. As you can see, that means just treat the plant. And to wrap up, very important, save 10% with the promo code Gartenschlau in the Colomi shop. That means add Colomi and accessories to the cart, enter the code Gartenschlau and save 10%. Very, very important. If you liked the video, give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Until the next video, there will be detailed videos on the topic of orchids. I will treat the orchid in the glass container more intensively. There are already videos. So which orchids do I have? So what craziness is out there? Orchids in a beer glass, for example. I've already shown you how to propagate the Dendrobium beryoda. Cuttings, super easy. And you can see so many other orchids blooming here, like the Cymbidium, the beryoda. Then, here is the Phalaenopsis japonica, and of course the Renantara vietnamica up front, which has formed a flower staircase. That and more in the next orchid video. Until next time, and goodbye.